Why did they call her Bloody Mary? Because 280 people didn't just die, they sizzled in public. Burned alive like it was a royal barbecue. Officially blessed. Politely applauded. They tried to hide this from you. They want you to remember her solemn prayers, not the crackle of burning skin. Imagine standing in a London square, the wind carrying the stink of roasted human flesh. Not a battlefield. Not an accident. An execution. Because the Queen said it was good for their souls. They called her Bloody Mary. But they don't want you to know why. Not really. They'd prefer you remember a pious Catholic queen, not the woman who ordered 280 people burned alive. If you want the truth they'd rather you didn't hear, consider subscribing now, because this is something you can't unlearn. This is not the story they tell in school. They want you to think monarchy is all silk and portraits, polite Latin prayers, not screaming men and women chained to stakes while crowds jeered. So let's see the real story. Because before she became the nightmare whispered about in Protestant pulpits, Mary Tudor was a miracle. Born in 1516, a long-awaited heir, Henry VIII's first legitimate child with Catherine of Aragon. Imagine the celebrations, bells ringing, gifts piled high, the court drowning in wine and hope. A girl, yes, but an heir. God's blessing on Henry's line. Catherine doted on her, taught her Latin, music, piety, shaped her into the perfect Catholic princess. A little scholar in velvet, praying with perfect posture, every word memorized in Latin like a holy incantation. But you know how this story turns. Henry VIII didn't want a girl forever. He wanted a son. So when Catherine couldn't deliver, he decided God must have changed his mind, or that Henry himself was simply above God's rules. And what do you do when the Pope says no to your divorce? Easy. You sack the Pope, or at least invent your own church. Call it a Reformation, so it sounds noble. That's the part they tell you in school. Henry as the strong king who broke Rome's grip. A Renaissance man with a big brain and a bigger codpiece. But they don't want you to see what it meant for Mary. She was about 17. Her mother cast aside, forced from court, dying in cold isolation at Kimbolton Castle. And Mary? Stripped of her title. No longer princess, just lady. No power, no inheritance. A royal prisoner in her own kingdom. Cut off from her mother. Not even allowed to say goodbye when Catherine died in 1536. And let's not sanitize this. Henry made her sign away her rights. Imagine that. Being forced to declare yourself a bastard so your father can marry the woman who destroyed your family. That's the seed of Bloody Mary right there. Not some inborn cruelty, but a girl taught that the state could rip your faith, your mother, your name, away with a signature. But wait, that's just the beginning. Because they thought they broke her. They didn't. They forged her into something terrifying. You think being disowned would make her submit? Wait until you see how she clung to her faith so hard it would one day burn England alive. Think about it. Mary was supposed to fold like cheap parchment. Henry's shiny new Church of England didn't just evict the Pope. It branded anyone who refused as an enemy of the state. Heretic. Traitor. Mary ticked both boxes like she was filling out an execution request form. While Henry sold England's soul for the bargain price of a divorce, Mary clung to Rome like a barnacle on Vatican marble. Not just Catholic, fanatically Catholic. Latin prayers hissing from her lips like holy curses aimed at her father's throne. That was her real crime. But you won't see that in the portraits. They prefer her with folded hands, not the face of someone who'd mug you over transubstantiation. She refused Anglican services, refused to call Henry head of the church, refused to acknowledge Anne Boleyn as anything but the crowned homewrecker. Imagine the court gossip. A sullen princess mumbling prayers for Dad's early demise in flawless Latin. Real cheerful at dinner. So they punished her, stripped her household, confiscated her jewels, sent her to drafty manors with loyal servants who doubled as snitches. They called it keeping her safe. Sure, like a hawk keeps a rabbit safe in its claws. Then came 1536. Anne Boleyn's neck met the axe. Did Mary get her title back? No. Henry swapped wives like they were dice in a cup. Married Jane Seymour. She delivered a son. Edward, England's Protestant messiah, in a diaper. Mary was told to smile politely. Clap for her baby brother, England's real hope. And she did, because they gave her no choice. They shoved a document in her face, guards looming, made her sign away her rights. Imagine it, declaring yourself a bastard, your mother's marriage invalid by your own hand, writing your own erasure. She signed, but she didn't forget, didn't forgive. They broke her title, but not her faith. She kept a rosary like contraband, whispered Hail Marys like coded messages, held forbidden mass in shadowed rooms like a black market priest. And then Henry died in 1547. Ding dong. The king is dead. Freedom, please. Enter Edward VI, 9 years old. Protestant as a sermon, with advisors who thought Catholicism was a plague best treated with fire. Cranmer, Northumberland. Men who looked at Mary and saw Rome itself in a velvet dress. They couldn't exile her. She was defiance incarnate. Edward hated her for it. They summoned her, threatened her, banned her priests. And Mary? She ran secret masses, like Tudor underground raves. Spies lurking in the pews. Imagine that. Your kid brother, the king, sending men to catch you praying wrong. When she refused to stop, Edward made it public, humiliated her, accused her of dragging England's soul back to Rome's dungeon. But Mary didn't flinch, didn't convert, didn't blink. She was Catherine's daughter, the same steel that told Henry VIII to go to hell, politely, in Latin, and it beat in Mary's chest like a war drum. But you think that was the worst of it? Not even close. Edward wouldn't live to see what he'd helped forge. Think Mary was dangerous on her knees? Wait until she stood up with an army. Think Mary was dangerous, kneeling with a rosary? Try picturing her riding at the head of an army. Edward VI was dying. The last act of Henry's miracle son was coughing blood onto a Bible, while his counselors panicked. The Tudor curse was efficiency itself. It killed heirs faster than they could rewrite the laws. They didn't want Mary, a Catholic queen in their shiny Protestant theme park. Please. So they tried to erase her the old-fashioned way. On paper, Edward's brilliant plan? The devise for the succession. Legal fraud with extra Latin. He cut Mary out entirely, named Lady Jane Grey instead. Sweet, bookish, 16, and most importantly, Protestant. Problem solved? Sure. If you think ignoring your father's will and crowning your teenage cousin counts as stable government, they thought Mary would take it. Smile politely, retire with her rosary, disappear into sainthood. But here's the secret they don't want you to hear. Henry taught her how to play dirty. Politics wasn't prayer. It was knives in the dark. When Edward croaked in July 1553, Jane was proclaimed Queen. The 9-day Queen. Catchy name. Terrible job security. Mary? She ran. Straight to East Anglia, her mother's old power base, where people still whispered Catherine of Aragon's name like a curse against Henry's ghost. Picture it. Smoky great halls full of scheming nobles arguing over God and taxes. Peasants sharpening kitchen knives for war. Priests offering blessings and suggestions for convenient accidents. Mary didn't just pray. She recruited, promised stability, legitimacy, the old faith in shiny gold vestments. Meanwhile, in London, panic. Councillors sweating through their fancy collars. Jane Grey sitting on a throne she'd never asked for, wondering if treason looked good in black. Mary's army swelled. Letters flew. Nobles switched sides so fast, they probably sprained something. The people cheered, not just for Henry's daughter, but for the end of Reformation whiplash. One day Latin, next day English, always taxes. They wanted certainty. Mary gave them that. Latin Mass, holy days. Rome's approval, complete with gold thread and self-righteousness. Northumberland tried to stop her. Led an army. Watched it evaporate around him. Arrested like a common thief. Beheaded. His fancy helmet didn't save him from the axe. And Jane? Dragged off sobbing to the Tower. A 16-year-old scapegoat in silk. Because nothing says God's will like sacrificing your niece to save your own neck. Mary entered London in August 1553. Triumphant. Crowds screaming. Bells thundering. Priests singing Latin so loud even God probably asked them to keep it down. They don't want you to see that complexity. They want her as Bloody Mary from day one. But she was a survivor, a princess disowned, a usurped heir who took back her crown with sermons and swords. But here's the catch. Taking England was easy. Keeping it? That was going to cost. Because next, she would make a deal that would set her kingdom on fire. Literally, she was about to marry Spain, and you haven't seen anything yet. So Mary had her crown, but a crown is just metal, without power behind it. She needed allies, an heir, and what better way than a royal marriage? Spain, Philip II, son of Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor. Catholic blood so pure it reeked of incense and regret. A match made in heaven for Rome. For England, an exorcism in wedding clothes. The council warned her. The people rioted. Protestant pamphlets screamed invasion dressed as a honeymoon. But Mary wouldn't budge. She saw God's plan, reuniting England with Rome, bearing a Catholic heir, saving souls whether they liked it or not. They drew up terms. Philip king in name only. No Spanish soldiers in towns. No meddling in laws. Carefully negotiated. Ignored in every Protestant broadsheet. Then came Wyatt's rebellion. 1554. 4,000 men rising to save England. Led by Sir Thomas Wyatt, who hated foreign rule more than he loved Protestant freedom. Picture it. Snow on the ground. Freezing men with rusty swords. Farmers chanting, England and no Spaniard. Mary's council panicked. Some begged her to flee, but Mary stood her ground. Spoke at Guildhall. Promised to fight and die with them. Swore England would never bow to a foreign king. It worked. The city stayed loyal. Wyatt's army stalled. The rebellion crumbled. But Mary didn't forgive. She ordered Wyatt beheaded, Lady Jane Grey executed, a teenage queen paying for other men's games. Mary knew mercy was weakness. She couldn't afford it. Not with Protestant nobles plotting, not with Spain watching. She married Philip in July 1554 at Winchester Cathedral. A grand Catholic mass. Latin chants in cold stone. A kiss sealing the deal, and half the kingdom's gag reflex. But if she thought marriage would save her reign, she was wrong. It made her enemies more desperate. Convinced her England needed cleansing in holy fire. Because next, Mary would prove she was Henry's daughter, not with a sword, but with a pyre, and the flames would make even her father flinch. Imagine it, a city square at dawn, grey light clawing at wet cobbles, the smell of rain mixing with old blood, a crowd pressed tight, whispering prayers and curses, all eyes on the stake in the center, kindlings stacked like an altar built to cruelty. This wasn't justice. It was theatre, because in Mary's eyes, heresy was a plague. And what did a good Tudor doctor prescribe? Fire. They called them the Marian persecutions. The reason they named her Bloody Mary, about 280 Protestants burned alive. Men, women, old, young. Some preached. Others refused to recant. Picture it. A bishop in scarlet reading charges like a bored auctioneer. A kneeling heretic. Smoke stinging their eyes. Families forced to watch. Conversion as the only ticket out. Kids sobbing while dad turned to ash. And Mary? Not cackling behind castle walls. Praying. Rosary in hand. Muttering salvation like a legal defense. Believing she was saving them from worse. This is what happens when piety forgets empathy. When your catechism gets blood-stained, raised on Latin and prayers, made a bastard by her father's divorce, watching her mother die in exile, swearing to undo her father's heresy. So she purged England with fire. These burnings, they weren't chaos. They were policy, public for a reason. Terror was cheaper than an army. Parish accounts paid for wood. Sheriffs billed the crown. 1555, Oxford. Latimer and Ridley burned together. Ridley's brother tried to feed the fire to spare him. Latimer, flames licking, said, "Be of good comfort, Master Ridley. We shall light such a candle in England as I trust shall never be put out." John Rogers, first martyr, father of 10, burned alive while his children watched. Mary thought she was saving England's soul. She ended up scarring it. The smoke told a different story. This was just the opening act. Think this was brutal? Wait to see who she burns next. Picture it. A city square slick with rain and old blood. Crowds crushed together, whispering prayers they hoped wouldn't get them arrested. Because by now everyone knew. If you so much as sneezed in Latin, Mary might decide you needed saving. By fire. This wasn't just punishing heretics. She wanted roots, not branches. So they burned farmers, weavers, widows so old they had to be carried to the stake. Because mercy, apparently, didn't include a chair with armrests. And the records? Pristine. Ledgers of misery. Dates, names, payments for wood, like a shopping list for Satan's barbecue. But they don't show you those in the royal portraits. They want you to remember her as the tragic daughter praying the rosary, not the queen turning heresy trials into public theatre. Imagine the crowd. Rain hissing on half-lit fires. Green wood belching smoke. The condemned coughing before the flames even caught. sheriffs ordering everyone to watch, because forced audiences were cheaper than propaganda pamphlets. Mary's government insisted it was for their souls. Repent now, or roast later forever. Such a welcoming church policy. But the real message? Obey, convert, or be today's entertainment. And the clergy? Real charmers, interrogating prisoners in freezing cells, threatening families. Because nothing says Christ's love like telling a mother, confess or watch your kids starve. Rowland Taylor, popular Suffolk priest, marched to Hadley. He kissed the stake, preached forgiveness while they lit him up, because forgiveness was perfectly fine for him to offer, just not Mary, or Alice Driver and Alexander Gooch, Ipswich martyrs. Driver openly mocked her interrogators, wouldn't kneel to liars. They tied her skirts carefully so she wouldn't flash anyone indecently while burning alive. So polite. You know, manners make the massacre. They'll tell you Mary didn't attend the executions, that she was too holy for gore. But don't mistake distance for innocence. She signed the warrants, read the reports, sent congratulatory notes like a grim RSVP, called it extirpating the weeds of heresy. A gardener with a torch, making sure nothing Protestant sprouted back. And the people? They learned fast. Protestant preachers fled. Families buried English Bibles like corpses. Prayers whispered behind locked doors. Because they understood what happened if you stood too close. But Mary wasn't finished. No. She thought God needed more kindling. Picture it. Oxford. Grey English sky. Smoke rising slow and greasy. And in the middle of it all, Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury, the architect of England's break from Rome, dragged to the stake like any gutter heretic. This wasn't some random burn. This was supposed to be Mary's grand finale. A public warning carved in fire. They forced him to recant, signed paper after paper confessing his errors. They humiliated him in sermons, promised mercy with one hand, held the torch with the other. But mercy has small print in Tudor England. So there he stood, in March 1556. Crowd hushed. He gave one final speech, and did the one thing Mary's men didn't script. He thrust the hand that betrayed him straight into the flames, held it there, let it blacken and crack, screaming it was damned. Imagine the crowd, watching a bishop roast his own flesh first. You don't forget that smell, that sound, that defiance. Mary wanted fear. She got legend. Because you can kill a man, but you can't kill everyone who remembers how he died. Instead of terror, she minted martyrs, an unintended factory line for Protestant propaganda. And Mary? She was watching her kingdom choke on smoke and doubt. Even her Catholic allies flinched at the stench. Whispers spread. Her health crumbled. Phantom pregnancies mocked her hope. No heir, no Catholic future. Just the fires dying down, and Elizabeth waiting in the wings with a smirk. When Mary died in November 1558 at 42, there was no grand mourning. No sermons for the Saviour of souls. Just the scrape of a new crown on a Protestant head. Elizabeth rolled back the burn laws, like they were last season's fashion mistake. But let's not get too smug. The same nobles who cheered Mary's purges gave Elizabeth standing ovations for tolerance. Because loyalty in Tudor England was a matter of who paid the organist. The church just changed the lyrics. They called her Bloody Mary forever after. And maybe she deserved it. But she didn't invent the fires. She just made sure everyone watched them burn. because nothing sells faith quite like the glow of a public execution. And if you want to uncover more dark history, click the video on the screen to see history's most inbred family that they desperately tried to hide from you. So inbred they could barely walk or speak,